Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, and welcome to another weekend book review. I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita.
You've given us a really eclectic mix this time.
Yeah.
Excerpts from Abhijit V. Banerjee and Cheyenne Olivier's Cooking to Save Your Life, plus some background on Banerjee's other work.
Oh.
A Nobel Prize-winning economist writing a cookbook. Now that's what I call food for thought.
It's a fascinating blend, isn't it? You've got personal stories, behavioral economics, cultural reflections, even discussions on poverty and inequality.
Honestly, when I first saw this combination, I thought, is this going to be like some dry economic treatise disguised as a cookbook?
Yeah.
But it's so much more engaging than that.
Banerjee and Olivier are really intentional about weaving those personal threads throughout. Like right from the start, they share the story about Banerjee's aunt being discouraged from working.
Right, because it was seen as somehow diminishing her husband's status.
Exactly. And that seemingly personal anecdote really illustrates the power of social pressures, especially for women, in a way that a straight economics textbook might not. It makes you think about like the invisible forces that shape our choices.
Totally. I mean, think about how many times you've made a decision based on what you thought other people expected, even if it wasn't the most logical or beneficial choice for you. Like maybe ordering a salad when you really wanted a burger because you were worried about what your friends would think.
Precisely. Behavioral economics challenges that classic economic assumption that we're all like perfectly rational actors.
Yeah.
Making decisions in isolation, it brings in the messiness of real life. Emotions, social norms, even cognitive biases we might not be aware of.
Okay, so how does this all tie back to food?
Well, Banerjee and Olivier argue that cooking itself is a microcosm of economic decision-making.
Oh.
You've got limited resources, time, ingredients, energy, and you're trying to achieve a specific goal, a delicious and satisfying meal. It's all about optimization.
It's like that classic dinner party problem they talk about.
Yeah.
How to wow your guests without spending 3 days in the kitchen. You're balancing effort, cost,
right,
and that desired outcome, just like in any economic decision.
And they even apply this economic lens to the recipes themselves.
They've got showstopper dishes, sure,
right,
but also everyday meals that are both delicious and efficient.
Yeah.
It's like they're saying you don't always have to go for the most elaborate option to maximize your satisfaction.
So it's not just about what you cook,
right,
but why and how you choose to cook it. It's like food becomes this window into how we make decisions in all areas of life.
Absolutely. And they connect this to cultural differences in food practices, too.
Sure.
For instance, Banerjee grew up loving those distinctly bitter Bengali dishes, something a lot of people might find off-putting.
Yeah.
It highlights how what we find delicious is shaped by our upbringing and cultural context.
It's like that age-old cilantro debate. Some people taste soap, others get this fresh, citrusy flavor. It's the same ingredient, but our individual experiences create totally different perceptions.
And this leads us to the power of food memories.
Okay.
Throughout the book, Banerjee and Olivier sprinkle in these really poignant anecdotes about meals shared with loved ones. I loved the story about Banerjee learning to cook with his mother. And the way he describes those early experiences, it's clear that food holds a deep emotional resonance for him.
Those passages really resonated with me too. They tap into this universal truth. Certain aromas, tastes, even textures can instantly transport us back in time. It's like food has this unique ability to unlock memories and emotions in a way that few other things can.
Totally. And they don't shy away from the bittersweet side of this either. Like Olivier's experiences cooking for her ailing father. Those meals became so much more than just sustenance. They were a way to connect, to care, to hold on to those precious moments.
It's like food becomes this language of love and comfort, especially during difficult times. And they connect this to the broader issue of aging and loneliness, particularly in the essay, The Burden of Age.
That story about the elderly man with Alzheimer's finding solace in khujur or gur peyesh.
Oh, yeah.
The traditional Bengali rice pudding. It's heartbreaking, but also so hopeful. It highlights how food can provide a sense of continuity and connection, even when memories are fading.
It's a powerful reminder of how something as simple as a familiar taste can evoke a sense of comfort and belonging, especially for those facing isolation and cognitive decline.
Yeah.
And it raises some tough questions about how we as a society care for our aging population.
Right, especially with changing family structures and increased mobility. Food might seem like a small thing, but it can be a powerful tool for combating loneliness and fostering social connection.
It's about creating those shared experiences, those moments of togetherness that nourish not just our bodies, but also our souls.
And this leads us perfectly into the next theme, food and identity. They really emphasize what we eat, how we eat it, and even the etiquette surrounding meals can be powerful signals of social status and cultural belonging.
One of the most striking examples is the contrast they draw between the strict etiquette of Western dining and the more tactile experience of eating with hands in India.
I love that observation about how, even within India, the way you use your hand to eat can be a marker of social background. It's like this unspoken code that reveals so much about cultural norms and hierarchies.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And it makes you realize how something as seemingly simple as a meal is actually imbued with layers of cultural meaning. We're not just consuming food, we're participating in a complex social ritual.
And they introduced us to this Bengali concept of ghanto, a type of vegetable stew, which seems to hold a special place in their culinary repertoire.
Yeah.
It made me think about all the dishes in my own family that carry those deeper meanings. The recipes passed down through generations, the foods we associate with holidays and celebrations.
It's like each dish tells a story.
Yeah.
A story about family, tradition, and the cultural tapestry that shapes who we are. And speaking of stories, let's move on to our next discussion point. Food, trade, and cultural exchange.
This is where the global scope of Banerjee's work really shines through. They explore how ingredients, ideas, and even entire cuisines have traveled across continents, influencing and transforming each other along the way.
It's like this ongoing culinary conversation that's been happening for centuries, driven by trade, migration, and the simple human desire to explore new flavors and experiences.
They mentioned the introduction of potatoes to India, which is mind-blowing when you think about how central potatoes are to so many Indian dishes today. It's hard to imagine those cuisines without them.
Right. It's like trying to picture Italian food without tomatoes. They weren't even part of the culinary landscape until relatively recently.
Yeah.
And now they're practically synonymous with Italian cuisine. And it's not just about ingredients, it's about the fusion of techniques and ideas. They mentioned kushari, an Egyptian dish that beautifully embodies this fusion. It's got lentils and rice from India, pasta and tomato sauce from Italy, and chickpeas, which are common throughout the Mediterranean.
It's like this delicious symbol of cultural interplay, a reminder that what we eat is a reflection of our interconnected world.
And they bring in the concept of food nostalgia, drawing on research by MIT economist David Atkin, who studied how immigrants often cling to the foods of their homeland, even when they're more expensive or harder to find in their new environments.
I think we've all experienced that to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's craving a specific dish from your childhood or seeking out familiar flavors when you're traveling. Food has this amazing ability to connect us to our roots, to offer a sense of comfort and belonging.
And it's not just a personal experience.
Right.
It's a powerful economic and social force.
Yeah.
They use the example of the Hunter traders in Uzbekistan. These Hindu merchants who traveled vast distances relying on a system of trust built through shared meals and social interactions. Food became the foundation for economic activity, bridging cultural divides and facilitating trade.
It's fascinating how something as simple as a shared meal can foster those connections, build trust, and create opportunities for exchange. But now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about a more serious topic: food and inequality. This is where Banerjee's expertise as a development economist really comes into play.
It's a topic he's been grappling with for decades. And he brings a nuanced perspective to the conversation, challenging common assumptions about poverty and hunger. They start by comparing the experiences of India and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Two countries with very different levels of development. Yet both facing challenges with food security.
It's a surprising comparison, right? You'd think the country with more resources would automatically fare better, but that's not always the case.
Exactly. The DRC, despite its abundant natural resources, suffers from widespread malnutrition due to factors like political instability, inadequate infrastructure, and unequal distribution of resources. It highlights how poverty isn't just about a lack of food. It's about a complex web of social, political, and economic factors that limit access to essential needs.
And they don't shy away from the challenges within India either. They call it India's protein problem. This paradox of having plenty of food production, yet struggling with widespread nutritional deficiencies, particularly among children.
They point out that poverty alone can't fully explain this discrepancy. Social norms, like prioritizing feeding boys over girls, and a heavy reliance on carbohydrate-rich staples like rice and wheat
Right.
also contribute to this issue.
And they offer some potential solutions, right? Like incorporating more protein-rich ingredients, particularly peanuts, into traditional dishes.
Peanuts are a readily available and affordable source of protein in India, yet they're often viewed as a snack rather than a core part of the diet. They suggest drawing inspiration from West African cuisine, where peanut stews are commonplace.
It's about thinking creatively and finding ways to adapt traditional recipes to meet nutritional needs.
Right.
And they see potential in community kitchens, like the Langar Khanas and Sikh tradition, which provide nutritious meals to those in need.
It's a beautiful example of how cultural institutions can play a vital role in addressing social challenges, ensuring that everyone has access to nourishing food.
This brings us to another pressing challenge: adapting to a changing climate. In their essay, Adapting to Hot Summers, Banerjee and Olivier discuss the increasing frequency of extreme heat in India and its devastating consequences for health and well-being.
It's a sobering reminder of how climate change is already impacting lives, particularly in regions where people rely on outdoor labor and lack access to adequate cooling systems.
And they're critical of the over-reliance on air conditioners as a solution, right?
Yeah.
Not just because of the energy consumption, but also because it can exacerbate inequality and lead to a more isolated society.
Exactly. They advocate for more sustainable and community-driven approaches.
Yeah.
Drawing inspiration from traditional cooling techniques like stepwells.
Those ancient architectural marvels that harness natural ventilation and the cooling properties of water to create these communal spaces for respite from the heat.
They envision modern adaptations of these principles, community shelters offering shade, cool drinks, and a place for people to connect and support each other during heat waves.
It's a fantastic idea, right? Blending traditional wisdom with modern innovations to create solutions that are both sustainable and equitable.
And they tie it back to food by suggesting recipes for cooling drinks, like the Vietnamese-inspired mango tea or the Moroccan-style cucumber water.
It's a reminder that even simple culinary choices can play a role in adapting to a changing environment. But now let's shift gears and talk about something a bit different.
Okay.
Banerjee's personal experience with the criminal justice system.
His essay, Unfair Imprisonments, is incredibly powerful. He draws on his time in Tihar jail during his student days, contrasting his experience as a privileged student with that of another young man who lacked the same social advantages.
I was surprised to learn that he had spent time in prison.
Yeah.
It certainly adds a layer of depth and personal weight to his perspectives on social issues.
He highlights a deeply concerning fact: the majority of people in Indian prisons are under trials.
Yeah.
Meaning they haven't even been convicted of a crime. They're caught in this system plagued by backlogs and bureaucratic inefficiencies.
And, as you might expect, those from marginalized communities are disproportionately represented among these under trials.
Right.
It raises serious questions about fairness, due process, and the human cost of a broken system.
It's a powerful indictment of a system that often fails to uphold justice and perpetuates cycles of inequality.
Okay.
And speaking of inequality, let's move on to the lavish Ambani wedding that captured global attention.
Yeah, conspicuous consumption. That essay really made me think about the dynamics of wealth, inequality, and the motivations behind extravagant spending. The sheer scale of that wedding was mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of dollars spent on a single celebration.
They acknowledge the natural outrage many people feel seeing such extravagance, especially in a country like India where poverty is still a stark reality.
Yeah.
They even compare the wedding costs to the annual budget for MG and RGA, the program that provides guaranteed employment to millions of rural households.
It's a stark contrast.
It makes you question priorities, right? Like, what could that money have achieved if it had been invested in social programs or infrastructure?
They delve into the motivations behind such displays of wealth, drawing on the work of sociologist Thorstein Veblen, who coined the term conspicuous consumption.
It's about signaling social status, using extravagant spending as a way to differentiate yourself from the masses.
But they propose an interesting twist in the case of the Ambani wedding. They speculate that for the Ambanis, it might have been less about impressing others and more about creating a truly unforgettable experience.
Yeah.
A celebration that reflected their own personal aspirations and desires.
It's like they'd already reached a level of wealth and recognition where they didn't need to prove anything to anyone. It was about fulfilling a personal vision, creating a spectacle on a grand scale.
But they don't shy away from the potential downsides of such extravagant spending. right? Like that trickle-down consumption effect, where the spending habits of the ultra-rich influence those lower down the income ladder, leading to overspending and debt in an attempt to keep up with unattainable standards.
They express concern about that very thing,
right?
Cautioning against the pressure to spend beyond one's means.
And they contrast this with the concept of thoughtful giving, highlighting the philanthropic endeavors of individuals like the Tatas and Azim Premji, who have channeled their wealth into social causes and charitable foundations.
It's a powerful reminder that there are different ways to wield wealth and influence.
And it sets up a nice segue into their essay, Thoughtful Giving, where they delve deeper into the world of philanthropy and its potential impact. This is where Banerjee's decades of experience in development economics really shine through. He brings this critical eye to the philanthropic sector, acknowledging its potential while also pushing for more effective and evidence-based approaches.
They highlight the valuable role philanthropy can play in filling gaps and supporting innovative initiatives that might not get funding from traditional sources.
Right, like private donors often have more flexibility to take risks and invest in experimental approaches.
Exactly. But they also express frustration with what they see as a tendency to chase trends and stick to safe, well-established approaches, even when the evidence suggests there might be more effective ways to allocate resources.
It's like they're saying, let's be more data-driven, more rigorous in our approach to giving.
Precisely. They call for a more thoughtful and critical approach to philanthropy,
right,
one that's grounded in research and a willingness to challenge conventional wisdom. They even critique the culture of donor gatherings with their predictable menus and conversations, suggesting that we need to shake things up and be more innovative in the way we approach giving.
And they tie this back to food in a rather humorous way by complaining about the unimaginative menus at these events. Like, come on, can't we be more adventurous with our catering?
Right. It's a lighthearted way to make a serious point about the need for fresh thinking and a willingness to break out of comfortable routines. And this brings us to our last essay for this part: Why I Won't Start a Restaurant.
I was intrigued by this title. It seemed like an odd topic for an economist to be writing about.
On the surface, it might seem like a strange choice. But Banerjee uses this personal reflection to challenge conventional economic assumptions about entrepreneurship and management. He starts by expressing his admiration for chefs and the joy he gets from fine dining, acknowledging the complexity of creating a successful restaurant.
It's a notoriously tough business, right? Highly competitive, long hours, tight margins.
And while many economists view businesses solely through the lens of profit maximization, Banerjee argues that running a restaurant well requires a deep understanding of human behavior, the ability to motivate a team, and a knack for navigating the chaos of a busy kitchen.
So it's not just about the numbers. It's about the people, the artistry, the passion that goes into creating a memorable dining experience.
And he draws a parallel between chefs and artists, highlighting how both require a combination of individual talent and collaborative effort to create something truly special.
It's like you can't have a Michelin-starred restaurant without a dedicated team working behind the scenes.
And this is where he brings in some fascinating research from economics, citing a study that found even relatively large firms often suffer from basic management failures.
Oh, interesting.
He suggests that economists need to move beyond simplistic models that assume perfect rationality and acknowledge the role of human fallibility, cognitive biases, and the challenges of coordination and communication in real-world organizations.
It's a call for a more nuanced and realistic understanding of how businesses actually function.
Precisely. And he concludes by admitting that while he admires chefs, he lacks the temperament and managerial skills to thrive in such a demanding environment.
It's a refreshingly honest and self-aware admission. It makes you wonder how many successful entrepreneurs might secretly share that sentiment.
It's a great reminder that not everyone is cut out to be a CEO, and that recognizing your own strengths and limitations is crucial for both personal fulfillment and business success.
Wow, we've covered so much ground already. From the economics of behavior to the complexities of social policy, the challenges of climate change, and the nuanced realities of entrepreneurship. And it's all been woven together through this fascinating lens of food.
It's amazing how food can serve as a lens through which we can examine such a diverse range of topics, and we're just getting started.
I can't wait to delve deeper into these themes in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of food, economics, and culture. Before we move on, I wanted to circle back to something we touched on earlier. The role of social policy in addressing issues like poverty and hunger. Banerjee and Olivier make a really interesting point about how historical narratives and power dynamics shape our understanding of social welfare.
You're talking about that contrast between the British colonial approach to like limited government intervention and the more generous pre-colonial traditions in India.
Precisely. They argue that the British emphasis on self-reliance and like a fear of creating dependency among the poor still echoes in some contemporary social programs. It's like this deep-seated suspicion of government intervention that persists even today.
It makes you wonder how much our current debates about welfare are influenced by these historical legacies.
They offer the example of the Imambara in Lucknow, where during times of hardship, anyone could just show up and receive food in exchange for work. It was like a built-in safety net, providing both sustenance and dignity.
It's almost like a historical precedent for programs like MG and REGA, isn't it?
Exactly.
The idea of providing aid through employment, recognizing that people want to contribute and earn their keep.
And it stands in stark contrast to the British policy of minimal intervention during famines, which often had devastating consequences.
It's a stark reminder of how ideology and political power can shape policies that have real-world impacts on people's lives.
And this leads us to a fascinating essay where Banerjee and Olivier explore the potential of a universal basic income, UBI.
Oh, okay.
It's a hot topic these days.
Yeah?
The idea of giving everyone a regular cash payment, regardless of their income or employment status.
I have to admit, when I first heard about UBI, I was skeptical. I thought, won't people just stop working if they're getting free money?
Yeah.
But they actually bring up a study that challenges those assumptions.
They discuss this groundbreaking 12-year UBI experiment in India.
Wow, okay.
Where researchers provided a basic income to entire villages. And the results were pretty remarkable. They found that people didn't just sit around and stop working.
So it didn't create this culture of dependency that some critics fear?
Not at all. In fact, they found that overall work went up slightly.
Really?
Though people did work less for others and focus more on their own projects.
So it actually fostered entrepreneurship and self-sufficiency.
Exactly. The number of non-farming businesses, like shops and restaurants, increased significantly in the villages that received the UBI. People invested more in their farms, bought durable goods, and even improved their nutrition.
It suggests that having that financial cushion can really empower people to take risks, pursue their own ventures, and ultimately improve their livelihoods.
It's like that saying, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime.
Exactly.
But of course, like any policy, UBI has its critics. Some argue that it's too expensive, that it could lead to inflation, or that it disincentivizes work.
Did Banerjee and Olivier address those concerns?
They do acknowledge that there are potential drawbacks and challenges to implementing UBI effectively, but they ultimately argue that the evidence from studies like the one in India suggests that the potential benefits outweigh the risks. They see it as a promising approach to addressing poverty and promoting economic opportunity, especially in a world facing rapid technological change and automation.
It's a thought-provoking idea, for sure. And it makes you wonder if our current social safety net systems are really equipped to handle the challenges of the 21st century.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about India's protein problem. This is a real eye-opener for me.
I remember this from our prep. The paradox of India having abundant food production, yet still struggling with widespread nutritional deficiencies, particularly among children.
It's a complex issue, but they make a compelling argument that a significant contributing factor is a lack of protein in the traditional diet. They compare India to the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is much poorer, but actually has lower rates of child wasting.
That's a surprising comparison, right? You'd think that the country with more resources would have a nutritional advantage.
They use it to illustrate that poverty alone doesn't fully explain the problem. They cite research showing that Indian children raised in the UK grow to the same height as their British peers, even though their parents might be shorter due to nutritional deficits during their own childhoods. It's like their genetic potential for growth is there, but it's being stunted by environmental factors.
It's fascinating how those early childhood experiences can have such a lasting impact on health and development.
And they suggest several factors contributing to this protein problem in India, including social norms that prioritize feeding boys over girls, and a heavy reliance on carbohydrate-rich staples like rice and wheat.
But they offer some practical solutions too, right?
Yeah.
Like promoting protein-rich foods, particularly peanuts.
Exactly. They point out that peanuts are readily available and affordable in India, but they're often viewed as a snack rather than a core part of the diet. They suggest incorporating peanuts into more traditional dishes, drawing inspiration from West African cuisine, where peanut stews are very common.
It's about being creative and finding ways to adapt traditional recipes to incorporate more nutrient-rich ingredients. And they also see potential in community kitchens, like the Langar Khanas in Sikh tradition, which provide nutritious meals to those who might not otherwise have access to protein-rich foods.
It's another example of how cultural institutions can be leveraged to address social issues and ensure that everyone has access to nourishing food. Now let's talk about another pressing challenge: adapting to a changing climate.
Okay.
Their essay, Adapting to Hot Summers, paints a stark picture of the increasing frequency and intensity of heat waves in India.
It's a real wake-up call about the human cost of climate change.
They highlight the devastating impact of extreme heat on health, productivity, and overall well-being, especially for those who work outdoors or lack access to cooling systems.
And they're critical of the over-reliance on air conditioners as a solution.
Exactly.
Not only because of the energy consumption, but also because it can exacerbate inequality and create a more isolated society.
They point out that while air conditioners might provide temporary relief for some, they're not a sustainable or equitable solution in the long run. They advocate for more community-driven approaches, drawing inspiration from traditional cooling techniques like stepwells.
Those ancient marvels of architecture that use natural ventilation and the cooling properties of water to create these communal spaces for respite from the heat.
They envision modern adaptations of these principles: community shelters offering shade, cool drinks, and a place for people to gather and support each other during heat waves.
It's a great example of how blending traditional wisdom with modern innovations can lead to solutions that are both sustainable and equitable.
And they even connect it back to food by suggesting recipes for cooling drinks, like the Vietnamese-inspired mango tea or the Moroccan-style cucumber water.
It's a reminder that even simple culinary choices can play a role in adapting to a changing environment.
Now let's shift gears and talk about a topic that might seem a bit unexpected: unfair imprisonments. Banerjee's essay, Unfair Imprisonments, is incredibly powerful. He draws on his own experience of being jailed in Tihar during his student days, contrasting his time as a privileged student with that of another young man who lacked the same social advantages.
That's right. He was part of a student protest at JNU that led to mass arrests.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that even in a democracy, the justice system can be deeply unfair and biased.
He highlights a really disturbing statistic. The vast majority of people in Indian prisons are under trials.
Wow.
Meaning they haven't even been convicted of a crime. They're stuck in a system plagued by massive backlogs and bureaucratic inefficiencies.
And of course, those from marginalized communities are disproportionately represented among these under trials.
Right.
It's a clear example of how systemic inequalities play out in the criminal justice system.
It raises serious questions about fairness, due process, and the human cost of a broken system.
This conversation about inequality leads perfectly into their essay on conspicuous consumption.
Yes.
Where they use the extravagant Ambani wedding as a starting point to explore the dynamics of wealth and the motivations behind such lavish displays.
The sheer scale of that wedding was mind-boggling. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent on a single celebration.
Yeah, it's hard to even fathom.
They acknowledge the natural outrage many people feel seeing such extravagance, especially in a country like India where poverty is still a harsh reality. They even compare the wedding's cost to the annual budget for MGN-REGA, which benefits millions of rural households. It really puts things into perspective.
It makes you question priorities, right?
Yeah.
Like, what could that money have achieved if it had been invested in social programs or infrastructure?
They delve into the motivations behind such displays of wealth, drawing on the work of sociologist Thorstein Veblen, who coined the term conspicuous consumption.
Right, the idea that in a status-conscious society, consumption becomes a competitive game, and people try to outdo each other with increasingly elaborate displays of wealth.
It's about signaling social status and differentiating yourself from the masses.
Okay.
But in the case of the Ambani wedding,
Yeah.
they suggest there might be more at play than just social signaling.
Really?
They speculate that for the Ambanis, it might have been less about impressing others and more about creating a truly unforgettable experience, a celebration that reflected their own aspirations and desires.
It's an interesting distinction. Like, they'd already reached a level of wealth and recognition where they didn't need to prove anything to anyone.
Right.
It was about fulfilling a personal vision on a grand scale.
But they don't shy away from the potential downsides of such extravagant spending. They express concern about what they call the trickle-down consumption effect, where the spending habits of the ultra-rich influence those lower down the income ladder, potentially leading to overspending and debt in an attempt to keep up with unattainable lifestyles.
It's like this pressure to consume more,
Yeah.
even if it means going into debt or sacrificing other important things.
They caution against falling into that trap, emphasizing the importance of financial responsibility and living within one's means.
And they contrast conspicuous consumption with the concept of thoughtful giving, highlighting the philanthropic endeavors of individuals like the Tatas and the Azim Premji,
Right.
who have channeled their wealth into social causes and charitable foundations.
It's a powerful reminder that there are different ways to wield wealth and influence.
And this leads seamlessly into their essay, Thoughtful Giving,
Yes.
where they delve deeper into the world of philanthropy and its potential impact.
This is where Banerjee's experience as a development economist really comes into play. He brings a critical eye to the philanthropic sector,
Right.
acknowledging its potential while also pushing for more effective and evidence-based approaches.
They highlight the valuable role philanthropy can play in filling gaps and supporting innovative initiatives that might not get funding from traditional sources. Right?
Exactly. Private donors often have more flexibility to take risks and invest in experimental approaches. But they also express frustration with what they see as a tendency to chase trends and stick to safe, well-established approaches, even when the evidence suggests there might be more effective ways to allocate resources.
It's like they're saying, let's be more data-driven and rigorous in our approach to giving.
They advocate for a more thoughtful and critical approach to philanthropy, one grounded in research and a willingness to challenge conventional wisdom. They even critique the culture of donor gatherings with their predictable menus and conversations, suggesting that we need to shake things up and be more innovative in the way we approach giving.
And they tie this back to food in a rather humorous way by complaining about the unimaginative menus of these events.
Right. It's like, come on, can't we be more adventurous with our catering? Can't we have something a bit more exciting than the standard chicken or fish?
It's a lighthearted way to make a serious point about the need for fresh thinking and a willingness to break out of comfortable routines.
And this leads us to our last essay for this section, Why I Won't Start a Restaurant.
I have to admit, I was intrigued by this title. It seemed like an odd topic for an economist to be writing about.
On the surface, it might seem like a strange choice.
Right.
But Banerjee uses this personal reflection to challenge conventional economic assumptions about entrepreneurship and management. He starts by expressing his admiration for chefs and the joy he gets from fine dining. He acknowledges the complexity of creating a successful restaurant.
It's a notoriously tough business, right?
Yeah.
Highly competitive, long hours, tight margins.
Exactly. And while many economists view businesses solely through the lens of profit maximization, Banerjee argues that running a restaurant well requires a deep understanding of human behavior, the ability to motivate and inspire a team, and a knack for navigating the unpredictable chaos of a busy kitchen.
So it's not just about the numbers. It's about the people, the artistry, the passion that goes into creating a memorable dining experience.
And he draws a parallel between chefs and artists, emphasizing how both require a combination of individual talent and elaborative effort to create something truly special.
It's true. You can't have a Michelin-starred restaurant without a dedicated team working behind the scenes.
He brings in some fascinating research from economics, citing a study that found even relatively large firms often suffer from basic management failures.
Oh, wow.
He suggests that economists need to move beyond simplistic models that assume perfect rationality and acknowledge the role of human fallibility, cognitive biases, and the challenges of coordination and communication in real-world organizations.
It's a call for a more nuanced and realistic understanding of how businesses actually function.
And he concludes by saying that while he admires chefs and the culinary arts, he recognizes that he personally lacks the temperament and managerial skills required to thrive in such a demanding environment.
It's a refreshingly honest and self-aware admission. It makes you wonder how many successful entrepreneurs might secretly share that sentiment.
It's a great reminder that not everyone is cut out to be a CEO, and that recognizing your own strengths and limitations is crucial for both personal fulfillment and business success. So that wraps up this section of our deep dive.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Social policy,
Yeah.
the complexities of poverty and malnutrition, the challenges of climate change, the criminal justice system, extravagant spending, and even the inner workings of the restaurant industry.
And it's all been connected through this fascinating lens of food. It's amazing how a seemingly simple topic can open up such a wide range of discussions about economics, culture, and the human experience.
It's a testament to the power of food to bring people together, spark conversations, and challenge our assumptions about the world.
I'm excited to see what other insights we uncover in the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back. I'm still thinking about just how deeply food is woven into so many aspects of life. From individual choices to global trends, it's amazing how a single ingredient can tell a story about history, economics, and even cultural identity.
It's true. And speaking of stories, Banerjee and Olivier really bring that to life in their essay, Landscapes and Foodscapes. They talk about how ingredients have traveled across continents, reshaping cuisines and becoming so deeply ingrained in local cultures that we forget they weren't always there.
It's like they've become part of the cultural DNA. Can you imagine Polish cuisine without pierogies? Or Punjabi food without aloo paratha? Those dishes are so iconic, yet the potatoes that are central to them came from an entirely different continent.
Exactly. It's a reminder that what we consider traditional is often a result of centuries of cultural exchange and culinary innovation. And they make this fascinating point about how the introduction of new ingredients often goes hand in hand with the exchange of techniques and ideas.
It's like a two-way street. It's not just the ingredient itself.
Right.
It's how it's prepared, how it's incorporated into existing dishes, and how it inspires new culinary creations.
Yeah, the tomato wasn't even part of Italian cuisine until relatively recent. And now it's practically synonymous with Italian food.
It's mind-boggling how much our culinary landscapes have been shaped by these global exchanges. And they point out that this isn't just a historical phenomenon.
Right.
It's an ongoing process.
Exactly.
That's where they bring in MIT economist David Atkins' research on food nostalgia among immigrants, right?
Yes. He found that immigrants often cling to the foods of their homeland, even if they're more expensive or harder to find in their new countries.
I think that resonates with anyone who's ever moved away from home, right?
Yeah.
There's this comfort and familiarity in those familiar tastes and smells. It's like a little piece of home that you can carry with you.
It speaks to the deep emotional connection we have with food, especially when we're in unfamiliar surroundings. It's a way to connect with our roots, our heritage, our cultural identity. And speaking of comfort food, I really connected with their essay, Edible Distractions, where they reflect on their own experiences during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Me too. It was such a personal and relatable piece. They talk about how cooking became like a source of solace and distraction during those uncertain times, a way to create a sense of normalcy and control amidst the chaos.
I remember those early days of the pandemic feeling so overwhelmed and anxious. Like so many others, I found myself spending more time in the kitchen, experimenting with new recipes, and finding comfort in the familiar rituals of cooking and baking.
There's something incredibly grounding about the act of creating something with your hands, especially when the world outside feels so unpredictable.
They make an important connection between this experience and the broader issue of mental health.
It's true. The pandemic really brought to light the importance of mental well-being and the ways in which our daily habits and routines can impact our emotional state.
They point out that even before the pandemic, there was a growing recognition of the link between food and mental health.
There's a reason why we crave chocolate when we're feeling down. There's actual science behind the mood-boosting properties of certain foods.
Exactly. And they suggest that incorporating more nutrient-rich foods into our diets can be part of a holistic approach to mental well-being.
Right.
It's not just about what we eat, but also how we eat.
Right. Taking the time to prepare and savor our meals can be a form of self-care, a way to slow down, appreciate the moment, and nourish both our bodies and our minds.
And they explore the social dimension of food in their essay, Breaking Rosa, Building Bonds, where they reflect on the cultural significance of Ramadan.
This is where they connect food to the idea of community and social cohesion, right?
Yes. They talk about how the shared experience of fasting and breaking the fast together creates a sense of unity and solidarity among Muslims. They even draw parallels to other cultural traditions, like Thanksgiving in the U.S., where food plays a central role in bringing people together.
It's a beautiful reminder that Regardless of our backgrounds or beliefs, food has this incredible ability to transcend differences and create those moments of connection and shared experience.
They also express some concern about the potential erosion of these traditions in an increasingly individualistic and fast-paced world. They worry that as people become more isolated, we might lose some of those social bonds that food has traditionally helped to foster.
It's a sobering thought. Like in our pursuit of convenience and efficiency, we might be sacrificing those moments of togetherness and connection that are so essential to our well-being.
It's a call to be more mindful of how we engage with food, to recognize its power to nourish not just our bodies, but also our communities and our spirits.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Well, first and foremost, food is so much more than just sustenance. It's a source of personal identity, cultural expression, economic activity, and social connection. And as Banerjee and Olivier so eloquently demonstrate, it can be a powerful lens through which to examine the complexities of our world, from individual behavior to global trends.
It's also a reminder that even seemingly simple choices like what we eat, how we prepare our food, and who we share our meals with can have ripple effects that extend far beyond our own plates.
I love that image of ripple effects. It reminds us that we're all interconnected and that our choices matter.
By being more mindful of those choices, we can contribute to a more just, equitable, and sustainable world. One where food is a source of nourishment, joy, and connection for all.
Beautifully said. So on that note, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to chew on. As Banerjee and Olivier remind us, food is a story. What's your food story? What are the dishes that hold special meaning for you? What are the food memories that shape your identity and connect you to your loved ones?
And how can those stories inspire you to make more thoughtful and conscious choices about the food you eat and the world you want to create? And don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more captivating deep dives like this one. And if you're enjoying the show and want to support us in creating more insightful content, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Every contribution helps us continue this journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.